So what's up, guys? You have here with you today, Dylan Taylor.
Chase, Logan.
And before we start, I would just like to say to you guys, I hope you are taking the safety precautions of wearing the masks and gloves and social distancing at least 6 feet. And I hope you are being safe in this crazy epidemic that's going on. As you can see, we'd usually be doing this in class, but we are doing an online presentation now. So we're from West Liberty University, and Chase and I will be covering the retrospective rate with you today.
And I also want to take time just to, everyone be safe out there and make smart decisions. Don't do anything that we wouldn't do or your parents wouldn't do. That's mainly what I'm trying to say. So, all right, so we're
Amen.
going to get to the first slide. So nowadays, rape is a big epidemic that plagues our world. And what that means in the retrospect of this topic is it is the least reported crime due to not reporting. So what that basically means is, say there's a crime that happens in a city, and that crime goes to the police, then that crime goes to court, and then that person may go to jail. Well, rape is like the least amount convicted crime out of all in the world. This makes it the hardest crime to pinpoint and lock down, and it is an extremely difficult problem to solve. This means that there are more issues where people have false accusations. There are more issues where stuff gets reported and then it never goes anywhere. And the rate of people getting locked up for this problem or facing some sort of justice is very low. It's very hard to pinpoint these areas in this type of crime. And this happens
Plus,
all over.
also speaking on people not speaking up about this, you have the rape myth. You know what I mean? There's females and males. I expect that there would be both females and males that will come out and they'll say that they have been raped, but the offender who raped them will it's always the he say she say battle. Like, oh, that's a myth, or it's a lie that she is telling me, et cetera, et cetera. And sometimes that actually is in the offender's ball game, because the courts will listen to him or her, and they will believe that the female or male is lying about the act that took place, leading to the word rape myth. You know what I mean?
And building some of the points that Dylan just stated, this particular crime does not it's not specific to a race, religion, or anyone in a certain type of country. This can happen to anybody, and is more
Anybody.
often not happens to people that you know. So an example
Right.
of this would be, say you're at a college party, your best friend that you knew for many years. That person could possibly be that person who does it. Not to say that it would happen or will happen, but there's a statistically a better like a more often chance that that is the case. In a lot of these cases we see, it's not very often that we see cases where it is a random person on the street or a mugging. It's more or less people that you would know or you have met in passing at a college party or party even at a work party. It doesn't really have a sort of this crime doesn't have sort of like an agenda.
Right. Right.
There's no
There's
specific
no
background.
there's profiling this crime to an extent because it is very easily hidden. You know what I mean?
And with that said, firstly, rape is a very intimate crime, so this makes it so for anyone whose once normal everyday life was suddenly shattered by an act of sexual violence, the trauma, the terror that can also shatter you and cause a horrible effect and attack on someone's life. So what this means is this type of crime is causes a mental strain on anyone who's having these issues or having this done to them. So, for example, um, a person who gets raped may not want to come out of their home for months at a time. They might spend months in their house just staying in because they think that possibly it could be something that they did wrong. And this is what makes this crime so intimate and so hard to pinpoint, because a lot of people keep this crime bottled up because it's almost like an attack of your liberty and your freedom. Um, because this is an intimate crime, victims of rape are more often like to still within their abuser through psychological manipulation, or in extreme cases, they are even afraid to leave due to the aggressor due to fear that they of dying or fear of being hurt. So
Right, and I feel as if that is probably the main reason that this isn't reported a lot. You know, because a lot of IPV, which is interpersonal violence and sexual harassment and rape, etc., happens in a domesticated household. You know what I mean? Between husband and wife, and yes, rape can even happen when you are married. The husband can force himself upon the wife multiple times without having consent. And the thing is as I said, they're married. You know, you have that financial unity. You have maybe you have kids together, and you're scared to leave for the safety of the kids. The husband hurting the kids, or the husband, like you said, hurting the wife, or in extreme cases, leaving the aggressor due to the fear of dying and being hurt severely. And I feel as if that is probably, if not the most, the reason that I believe in is the reason that rape is not easily tracked. You know what I mean?
yes, and that is exactly what we're trying to bring across in this topic. But to further on this subject, we need to dive into sort of the history of rape and some of the laws and why it is such a big issue in today's society and what really caused it. So there are some theories involved with this. There is the theory of personality. So, oops, sorry guys, we actually skipped some slides. We skipped a slide. Sorry about that.
Oh, there we go. We're good.
So there are
bear with us.
Yeah.
Bear with us.
So, the laws on sexual misconduct, harassment, and sexual assault continue to progress. So what this means is, in the 1960s, a major change was made in American rape law. And in that period, rape was used as a tool or a motivative need to exert some sort of will or power over a woman. And it is what that was used for is to keep status quo in the household, basically. And it is clear that change will be made on an ongoing basis on establishing nationwide conversation on sexual abuse and misconduct. But with that said, this means that most of the time that at that time period there was no one said anything about it. It was hard for women or anyone that was being raped to fight against it because there were no really laws in place.
Or even to have a voice, you know?
Yeah, there was no voice. They had no way of fighting back against what was being done to them. But the anti-rape movement is a social political movement and is part of the movement that fight against this harassment and assault. However, before the 1960s revolution, rape had been viewed as a sex crime carried out by pathological men. So what this meant was it wasn't considered a heinous crime. It was more considered it'd be like sort of, it's hard to pinpoint exactly. Dylan, if you could shed some light on this.
Okay, so as pathological men, something our professor likes to say a lot is men are pigs. And there is a lot of men that are pigs, and we like to instill our power upon others. And with something that I will cover later in this PowerPoint is there is this heavy patriarchal difference between men and women, this constant war with one another. And like Chase said, in the beginning, instilling our power upon women back in the day was normal because that's how the household was oriented, which actually can lead into an intergenerational aspect of rape due to the fact that back in the day, men, it was normal to instill their power upon women in the household because the men would go to work, the woman would clean, cook, take care of the children, would tend to the men's need. And it's hard, it must be hard for humans to generationally excel past that point, and we are seeing that more consistently nowadays.
Yes, we are, and it has become an issue, and it's also an issue before then. But this is what really bred this sort of society we live in, to where now it's become a issue where it's very unreported. because
Right,
it
right.
was.
And now that the conversation is getting a lot more louder, and with our excelling technology and stuff like that, people like us, like normal people in everyday society, is having more of a voice that can be heard on social media platforms, on the internet, etc. Which will, I feel as if the more that our technology advances, the more of a voice each individual person will have, especially when being a victim of rape.
Yes. To the next slide. So we have to dive into some of the theories that
Oh,
sort
this is
of
the good part.
that sort of encapsulate and describe why people may commit rape and why people would even think about rape or what causes them to do it.
Right. So, so we have the theories involved. So these three theories really stuck out to me. So we have the theories of personality, like Chase said before when we messed up, and then we have the theories of social learning, and then we have the feminist theory. So the theories of personality was first introduced by Sigmund Freud in his research, claiming that there was developmental issues in the earlier stages of one's development. This offers a unique perspective of why sexual assault is carried out. For example, let's use, what's a good name? Let's use John. All right. So John is 9 years old. One day, while John is riding his bike, doesn't have a helmet on. Always wear your helmet. John falls off the back of the bike and suffers from a fractured skull. So after going to the emergency room, John's parents were told that he was suffering from a small concussion, a small concussion. And John's parents take this and it goes unchecked. And ultimately, these symptoms lead to John is now getting in trouble in school. So as you can see, you are already seeing a change in his personality from the event of falling off the bike and fracturing his skull and the mild concussion that John has received. But then you start to have these symptoms where John is now, like I said, getting in trouble in school. He's having trouble paying attention, signs of ADHD, ADD, and having these episodes of lashing out at the teacher. So when looking further into John's future, he is now a senior in high school and he is being charged with rape. So ultimately, from the symptoms being unchecked, and now John is being charged for rape, his parents asked for him to have a neuroscan and to undergo a psych evaluation. So after having the neuroscan, you will see that John's what's it called? His supramarginal gyrus, which is actually where it's near the frontal lobe. You will see that is where a human's empathy is created from. And when being asked if John knew what he was doing was wrong, he said no, I did not know that the girl wanted me to stop, and that was ultimately from him lacking being able to empathize with the female. So now we have the theories of social learning. So this provides useful insight as to the influence in one's life that results in the act of rape being carried out. A lot of empirical evidence shows indication that sexual harassment is actually a learned behavior. So, for example, let's just go with John again, because that's the first name that we use. But John has been a victim of sexual assault since the age of 8 by his uncle that previously moved in with the family. So John has accepted this as more or less his societal norm by being manipulated by his uncle. John eventually carries out these acts on others because he was influenced by his uncle and his love. He's lacking that love, tender, and care because his uncle said whenever he says stop to his uncle's just like, oh, it's okay, bud, it's just for fun, you know. So now he's creating a similarity between no and fun. So no does not mean no stop. No means, oh, it's okay because it's fun. You know what I mean? So because of this influence of his uncle, John does not know the sexual boundaries leading to the future of John forcing himself upon a woman around his 20s. So now John is being charged with rape. John just keeps getting charged with rape. and he proceeds to say, I didn't know she wanted me to stop. This is because John would tell his uncle, like I said, no and stop is fun. So he created this correlation because of the social influence of his uncle that this is okay. That when someone tells you no, it means keep on going just because maybe you personally think it's fun, but it is not. And this can play into the theories of personality as well, because that social learning aspect that he's getting from his uncle is affecting his personality as well.
And a huge part. A huge part of the way humans learn, we learn through each other. So this is a big factor into what people could possibly use as a theory
too. Plays in so many aspects of crime. You know what I mean? Especially at the age of John being the age that he is, his mind is still a sponge. He is sucking in all this information, and your social norm is technically instilled to you at that age. You know, and you carry out what you learn as a child into your future learning in the way that you carry about your life. You know what I mean?
Yeah, it's very hard for someone at the age of 8 who is able to absorb so much information at that young and is learning from no one else but the people around them to change their lifestyle at 23, 25 years old, when the primitive part of our brain comes into action, and these acts are primitive acts. It is hard for him to realize that is not socially acceptable when that has been socially acceptable through his entire life.
Right.
Then, and therefore becomes an issue.
When he finds out that it is socially unacceptable, he is at the point of age where his brain is already like rather fully developed. He already has like this muscle memory, his regular memory, that carrying out acts like this is okay. And now he's having to switch his whole entire thought process around in rehabilitation, etc. Yep. But this last theory that we have, it's a rather new theory to me personally, but you have the feminist theory. This involves the relationship between male and female, king of power inequality between genders, suggesting that prevention of sexual harassment starts with the fixing of patriarchal dominance that allows sexual abuse to be carried out. Like I was talking about previously in this PowerPoint, this is closely related to power control theory. We have generationally instilled in society that male and females are different, which we aren't. We just look different, and one's a boy, one's a girl. And we need to, in order to fix this, we need to crumble that patriarchal dominance that male is always dominant over female. And in order to do that, like I said, it's going to, like with racial disparity, for instance, it's going to take a unified group of people that, like we were talking about, creating a voice of awareness, self-education, education of others, charities, safe houses for those who are victims of rape. And like this feminist theory says, the prevention of this is equality, which I know male and female has been fighting for this for years already, and it might never be fixed, but it is up to us as a population and as this male and female society to make changes to this.
And when we look at this difference between the male and female, we're not talking about a physical difference, we're talking about a social difference.
Right.
Because the physical difference of a male and a female will never change. That's something that is impossible. It's scientifically impossible to change. The strength and from birth, it's impossible to change that.
Right.
A male is going to be stronger than a female. So socially, we have to change this sort of
how we interact
stigma
with one another. Right.
And this is where it stems from. the relationship between male and female has always been that the male's at the top of the hierarchy and the female is the lackey. And this is where we have to split this train of thought and move into a more progressive, more forward way of thinking into this aspect to try to lower the incidence of unreported crime and even reported crime, because this will greatly reduce these numbers. And so will if we apply the social learning theory and the theories of personality. If we apply the social learning theory, we could possibly educate children at the schools and try to educate the parents. Because it all starts
with the youth.
Yeah, try to educate the youth that if something's happening to them, that should not be happening, and that it's wrong, that it's not normal, and that
right, like the darkness to light training, for instance. That
darkness to light training is a great example of that and a great tool to be used, and it is used. We've used a lot of examples from it and how it helped us get a better understanding on how to teach children that there is a way to speak out and a way to not be a part of this statistic.
Right. So next we have the anti-rape movement is a socio-political movement, meaning it is both a social and political movement that is part of a movement to fight against harassment and assault. So before the 1960s revolution, the rape had been viewed as a sex crime carried out by pathological men, like Chase said previously in our PowerPoint. And so what this means is that the fight against rape is being fought on the forefront of both social and political. You have females fighting for equality still, even after the women's rights movement. The social impact that males and females need to just be civil with one another and actually try to be able to reason with one another in a heated argument, a fight, etc. Interpersonal violence needs to be taken out of the picture completely within households. And sexual harassment and sexual assault is being fought in the workplaces with male and females, male bosses on female co-workers, etc. And yeah, it's just the socio-political movement is just, it's giving the fight against rape a louder voice to be heard throughout society.
This gave this crime a big movement point from being just a sex crime, as quoted into this, what you see on this PowerPoint, to a violent crime. Because today it's considered a violent crime, an act of violence towards someone else. If you commit a rape, you have committed a violent crime, where it's obviously becomes more of a higher offense, whereas a sex crime is a lower offense. We can even put into terms where a sex crime could be something as child pornography, whereas that may not be considered a violent crime. It's considered a sex crime.
Right.
But rape has moved from the spectrum to further lower the numbers and further progress towards a society that is deterred to commit this crime.
So then we have the sexual abuse may have permanent, devastating impacts on women and their families, friends, and neighborhoods. Now, Kathleen Basile insists that sexual violence is a widespread problem that is associated with negative health outcomes throughout life. So being a victim of rape has very, very many serious repercussions. Rape being a slippery slope of psychological problems. A woman can suffer from PTSD. She can develop antisocial behavior, becoming depressed, attempting suicide, or the worst, actually being successful at attempting suicide, etc. Excuse me. So playing into the feminist theory, as presented in the PowerPoint, both men and women are constantly at war with one another, more or less. Both genders play roles in cyber harassment. You have stalking, sexual harassment, etc. Both can be victims of rape, but the solution, like I said, starts with the crumble of the male and female patriarchy battle.
And to add more points to this, um, I've had some experiences where I've met people that have been a part of this crime, and where this really hurts people in the long run is their mental psyche, is where they become less wanting to live their lives normally as they did before, and they tend to stay in a more sheltered area, and they shelter themselves from the outside world more than trying to keep progressing forward and progressing into a better state of living their life and exceeding their life as they would beforehand. Whereas when they have this crime committed towards them, they become sheltered and turn themselves into almost like a turtle shell.
Right, or in like some really bad cases, there's been psychological recession, which, as in psychological recession, you are actually putting yourself in an earlier stage of mental awareness. So say you're 24 years old when you got raped. Afterwards, you are having such a difficult time trying to cope with what has just happened with you, is that you recede into yourself, and that can change your mindset from a 24-year-old to being a 12-year-old again. And what sucks about that is after the fact of that happening in a court case, like, you're gonna have like a hard time using a witness that has receded into a 12-year-old's mind. You know what I mean? Because you can have the opposite side arguing that different traumatic experiences have caused that, and that the rape myth is yet again a factor within the court case.
Yeah, this is where false accusations and false reporting becomes an issue as well. We have tons of examples where many college students, they're star athletes that have been sent to prison on terms to where the woman had wanted to either get the person in trouble for attention, they did something that they didn't like, or they had consensual sex, but she went back on it and said that the person raped her. Now that's false accusation. That's the problem we're running into now, is where it's hard to report the ones that are real because we have ones that are fake, and it's hard to differentiate which ones are real, which ones are not, because we're having ones. It's these entire cases are all on hearsay, and one's judgment versus another, unless the person that was raped comes in for a test within the 24 hours of the rape, which usually more or less does not happen. It's hard to get people
and also
come in.
Also you have to have that that internal damage done to you as well. You know what I mean? And most of the times, with sexual abuse and stuff like that, most of the things that you can only see are the physical damage that is being done to you. And like Chase said, after being raped, a rape kit has to be performed within 24 hours, or the genitalia will fix itself, and it won't be able to be carried out anymore.
The evidence will be lost in that time period. Therefore, it can't be used in court.
It turns into hearsay.
Then it becomes a hearsay case.
Yeah. So furthermore into rape, the community media and awareness had big efforts to deter abuse. As Cebulska argues, despite the overall increase in reporting over the years, the conviction rate for rape remains persistently low. As you can see, 81% is from swelling, bruises, cuts, and scratches. Internal injuries and unconsciousness is sitting at 11%. Knife or gunshot wound is sitting at 2%. You have other at 6%, and you have death at 0.1%. So these percentages are important. I'm going to go over those first a quick second. So as you can see, swelling, bruises, cuts, and scratches are 81% of the damage being done during sexual assault, rape, sexual abuse, etc. And those are only physical implications that something is being done to you. And when arguing that someone has raped you and you only have physical signs of damage, he or she can say, oh, that's because you fell down, or oh, that's because you we were playing around the other day, and that turns into a hearsay court case, like Chase just said. And then the internal injuries and unconsciousness, that 11%, you're able to, I'm pretty sure that 11%, all of them got prosecuted for sure, because you have those internal injuries, you have those signs, you have those unconsciousness. The 911 had to be called due to that. And then you have knife, gunshot wounds sitting at 2%. I'm not very surprised about that statistic, because more or less the person is either being killed or etc., and that person will be prosecuted for that crime with the evidence that is gathered against them. Death 0.1%. You see this more in, and I hate to say it, it's so disturbing, but infant rape, when you have those of older in age raping infants and potentially killing them. And the reason I feel as if, as Kabuska said, the rate for rape remains persistently low. And personally, for me, I feel like the fight on rape and the voices that have been created has just started. 4 to 5 years ago, you had mainstream media coverages on multiple rape cases with the coach from the Olympics. You had the Penn State stuff go down, and I feel as if that is what really started to create a voice. And I feel like the voice, like I said, with the technological advances that we are going to have, is just going to create this very loud voice against rape, and you will actually see the rate for rape. It'll become persistently high, but then you will see it plateau as we become more aware that this is actually happening to us, more educated, and setting up more contingencies for people that are victims of rape. And you will see that plateau shoot way downwards, and it's going to actually be a valid statistic and not just due to people not speaking up, victims speaking up about their rape.
So finally, rape is a threat to peace and health, and the issue is sexual harassment. It prohibits women from engaging in peace and political processes and restoration and reconciliation. So a significant number of women, because of violence, lose their well-being and education and family. So where this stems from is people that are a victim of this crime lose the ability to function normally in life, and they lose the ability to lead a normal life. So an example of this would be a young girl gets raped by her parents. She has trouble going to school and focusing in school and learning in school, and then that leads to later on down the life, what that leads to is it could be a possibility of hardship in her life, and hardship later on. That could be for anyone, not just a
drug
woman.
abuse. Drug abuse is very high for rape victims.
Yes, they use it as a coping mechanism. So alcohol could be one, drugs, any sort of prostitution becomes involved as well, because they feel that they have done nothing else but that. So they consider themselves as almost like a tool or a piece of useless equipment. So this is all they could do, and this becomes a mental battle that they have in their head, that anyone would have in their head, that they have to fight early on through this process, and it has to stop early on in the process. And to do this, you would have to fight. You would have to go against what's happening towards you and speak out early on in your life. And that's what training like Darkness to Light and other sorts of trainings that we do would help us detect those kind of problems and seek help for those people.
I mean, it's just rape is such a sad and disgusting thing. I mean, you are as an offender, you are stripping that person of their rights as a human being. You know what I mean? You are forcibly putting yourself upon that person, and that's disrupting the peace of their life. Their reality is now skewed because of what you've done to them, and they are going to carry out every day psychologically thinking that internal monologue is going to be thinking about that moment for the rest of their life. and how it says it prohibits women from engaging in peace, like I just said, in political process and restoration and reconciliation. Like, in order to get that restoration and reconciliation, like, you actually have to be socially inclined to interact with people, to get help, to feel like yourself again. But because of the rape, you have now turned into an extreme kind of introvert and being scared of everyday life, and that's affecting your political process as well, because most politicians are men, and you are not able to support those politicians in power, which upset your political process. You won't get a vote because say the governor that's running is the governors that are running are males, the presidents that are running are males. Like, that's messing up your political process, and thus it's messing up society, because, like, if enough people are having the same mindset, you're having thousands of victims of rape that aren't involved in the political process due to this act of rape.
And with that said, this is obviously a terrible issue we deal with, but there are the laws we have in place have seen numbers where reports are beginning to surface more often and causing people to enter in this conversation. So that's a beginning point that we can stand off of. We can use this as a building block. These laws we have in place are a building block into putting people into these points where, say, they are getting raped, they are in this problem, they are a victim of this crime, they can further themselves. They use the laws that are in place and use the process and use the system to get themselves out of that environment and out of that lifestyle and move on forward to a better one.
Right.
And with the rising number of people entering this conversation, the rise in laws using addresses to concern the IPV and rape, etc., this could exceptionally help these victims and help these people with this problem that they're having.
No, I think it will greatly help. That is for sure. So finally, the problem of rape can break the institutions which anchor community values, thus disrupting their transition to future generations. So when this can affect your whole entire community, you know what I mean? Because once it happens to one person, you're scared that it can backfire and happen to multiple people within your community. That's why they have, if you're a sex offender, they have you register. But the thing is sex offenders can only live within certain distances of certain buildings and institutions, and people within the community can check those, etc. And this brings a community to be scared of allowing their children to leave the house, to be socially interacting with people, which is messing with the values of how the community functions. This is transitioning by knowing that you have a sex offender within your neighborhood. This is disrupting the transition to future generations, because those children are now, because of protective parents and parents that are scared of their child being sexually abused, are turning them into introverts, keeping them within the household, not allowing them to be socially inclined, go outside and play, walk outside to the park, and actually be able to have that sense of safety when allowing your kids to get outside. And by doing this, you're intergenerationally influencing these kids to stay inside and to be an introvert, whenever we need to educate these kids on what they need to do to be safe, and not just shelter them and protect them and not allow them to spread their wings and actually interact in society.
And the best way to do this is to teach them how to learn in situations that they're in, and teach them to avoid situations that could cause them possible harm. So, for example, we'll use college as an example, because college is a great example for this topic. Mm-hmm. A lot of college parties happen across the country every day. A lot of college parties that involve this type of action could happen. And this could be a very big issue. And it has happened, and it probably will happen, because it's something that is hard to deter people from doing, even though with the laws in place. But we have to teach the children that, with this next generation, that when you're choosing the environments and situations that you're in, that you need to choose carefully. Whereas not so much as being out in public, more often than not, statistically, you're safer in a random place out in public than you are with someone you may know from this happening.
Right, because like we were saying in the previously that I believe it's 80 to 90% of all crimes are committed by somebody that you personally know.
Yes, and that is the biggest problem we have is a lot of it is sort of abrupt, and it's almost like I don't believe that kind of happened sort of way of thinking, and it almost usually more often than not alcohol is involved, so therefore this means we have to teach the kids of the next generation to avoid these types of places and avoid that type of activity, not necessarily because it's bad, but to avoid the possibility of that happening. So a way to do that,
like in Darkness to Light, as they've taught us, don't use fun words for the genitalia and for the private parts. Like, don't use PP or P-bug or anything like that, or cookie, for instance. I believe is one of the examples that was actually in Darkness to Light. And this child came forth to a teacher and said, my daddy took my cookie last night. And the teacher had no idea what was actually going on because of the fun word that the parents have implemented for private areas. And by educating the youth and by being more interactive with education in general, like, we are able to generationally influence these younger kids, helping them to become safer and more knowledgeable of what situations to avoid. And like I said, don't use fun words. Use penis, use vagina, use all those real words, so that they know that those private areas are theirs, and that if somebody is trying to get towards those private areas, that they need to call for help. They need to run away, and they need to find that positive influence that we are trying to instill in them.
I agree 100%.
So I believe that is it for us today, guys.
That is it.
We hope you enjoyed it. This was our first time, so I hope it didn't turn out too bad.
Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for bearing with us through this. This is obviously our first time doing this. Hopefully you guys enjoy it, and we will see you hopefully next time.
Hey, and be safe. Social distancing, 6 feet.
6 feet, baby.